Ready for a wild ride today? We're diving into the world of global economics, specifically the US dollar.
The mighty dollar.
Exactly. And guiding our journey is this very interesting book I've been reading,
Oh, yeah. It's called
The Almighty Dollar.
Catchy.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not just the title. It explains things by following a single dollar bill around the world.
Clever. It makes you think about how much a single dollar sees, right?
It totally does. And the story actually starts off in a surprising way. Picture this. 2003, U.S. troops are raiding Saddam Hussein's palace.
Tense moments.
Right. And instead of, escape tunnels or weapons, what do they find? Millions. And I mean millions of U.S. dollars.
Wow, talk about ironic.
Right. Even America's adversaries see the dollar as some kind of safe haven. It really sets the stage for how powerful the dollar is globally.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's accepted pretty much everywhere.
Exactly. And it got me thinking, why is that? Why is the dollar the go-to in a crisis, the currency of international trade, the one everyone seems to rely on?
Well, the book dives into the history, and it points to 1944 as a pivotal year. World War II has just ended, and the global economy is, well, a mess. So 40 countries get together to create some order.
Sort of a financial peace treaty.
Yeah, you could say that.
hmm
And what came out of that was something called the Bretton Woods system. Essentially, it crowned the U.S. dollar as the leading currency for international trade.
So the dollar becomes the world's leading currency. Was that just because of America's influence?
Part of it was definitely America's position at the time. The U.S. was an economic powerhouse overflowing with gold, and back then, currencies were directly tied to those gold reserves.
So every dollar was like a little gold certificate.
Precisely. But here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward to the 1970s, and the U.S. is printing more dollars than their gold reserves could handle, so they untie the dollar from gold.
I bet that caused some chaos in the markets.
You'd think so. But that's where the almighty dollar offers a really interesting insight. A currency's strength isn't just about gold, it's about trust. Yeah, when you hold a dollar, you're trusting the U.S. government, its institutions, its future.
So it's more about believing in the country than the actual physical gold backing it.
Exactly. The world took a leap of faith with the U.S., and to keep that trust, the U.S. made some very deliberate moves. One example that the almighty dollar highlights is the 1973 oil crisis. Remember that?
Yeah, my parents still talk about those gas lines.
Yeah.
How's that related to the dollar, though?
Well, the U.S. made a deal with Saudi Arabia. All Saudi oil, which was and still is a huge deal, had to be traded in U.S. dollars.
That really shows how much influence the U.S. has, right? So the dollar is king. But what about China? They've become a major economic power, too.
It's one of the most interesting parts of the book, how China's rise played out alongside the dollar's dominance. I mean, it's pretty incredible when you think about it. China going from mostly farms to a global economic force in just a few decades.
Yeah, you always hear about the economic miracle there. But how?
Well, the almighty dollar uses this really relatable example. Imagine you're at Walmart just doing your regular shopping trip.
Okay, picking up some groceries, maybe grabbing a few things for the house.
Exactly. Now look around at all those products. Most of them unbelievably affordable. And a lot of them probably say, made in China.
Ah, the Walmart connection. It's easy to forget that those everyday purchases are part of this much larger story about how global trade works.
Right. See, to become the world's factory, China had to make some big changes. In 2001, they joined the World Trade Organization, the WTO.
That was a big deal, right? It's like they were finally being recognized as a major player.
Exactly. Joining the WTO meant following the rules, though. China had to open up to foreign investment, cut tariffs, make their economy more market-driven.
It sounds like a risky move.
Uh,
Was there any pushback to that?
There were definitely some risks involved, but for the most part, it really paid off. Foreign investment poured into China, factories were built everywhere, and suddenly made in China was everywhere.
Which was great for consumers like me who want good deals. But becoming the world's factory doesn't automatically mean you're getting rich, right? I mean, look at the iPhone. It's assembled in China, but Apple makes most of the profit.
That's a great point, and the book uses that exact example. The iPhone shows that while Chinese workers get jobs and the country gets investment, a lot of the profits go back to companies mostly in richer countries.
So they're doing the work, but not necessarily reaping all the rewards.
That's one way to look at it. But the almighty dollar highlights something really important. Foreign investment isn't just about immediate profits. It's about gaining knowledge and skills.
Like the saying goes, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach him to fish.
Exactly. It's a long-term strategy. Sure, the profits might be smaller at first, but the experience and expertise gained are super valuable. It's how countries like China climb the economic ladder. They start by assembling, then they learn to design and innovate.
So even though everyone was focused on the dollar, China was quietly making its own moves.
And that brings up the big question, can the yuan actually compete with the dollar? Can it become the world's leading currency?
It's the question everyone's wondering, right? Can any currency really dethrone the dollar?
It's a tough one. Because let's be honest, there are some serious perks to having the top spot.
Like what? What does it really mean to have the world's leading currency?
Well, the almighty dollar talks about this thing called seigniorage. Basically, when your currency is the global reserve, you can print more of it and other countries will still accept it for goods and services.
So it's kind of like having a never-ending credit card that everyone takes.
In a way, yeah. And it gives you a lot of power in international trade.
And obviously, as China gets more economic clout, they're going to want a piece of that pie.
For sure. It's not just about prestige either, it's also about security.
Yeah.
If your own currency hits a rough patch, having a globally recognized backup is vital.
That makes a lot of sense. So how is China trying to make the yuan more appealing on a global scale?
They've been making some interesting moves, like setting up these currency swap agreements with countries like Russia, Japan, even the UK.
So instead of converting to dollars, they're streamlining trade with direct exchanges.
Exactly. It chips away at the dollar's dominance. They're also pushing for new development banks, like the BRICS Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Creating alternatives to the traditional financial systems.
Yep. It's all about offering more options for trade and investment that don't rely on the US dollar.
But realistically, if I'm a business owner right now, the dollar still feels like the safer bet, doesn't it?
It's a fair point. While China has made progress, the almighty dollar doesn't shy away from the gap that still exists. I mean, think about this. Back in 2020, China had a huge chunk of global GDP, but the yuan only made up a tiny percentage of global reserves.
So what's holding the yuan back? Why isn't it as widely used as China's economic power suggests it could be?
The book points to a couple of key hurdles. One is convertibility. Right now, there are restrictions on how freely you can exchange yuan for other currencies.
That's got to be a major roadblock for global trade.
Absolutely. The other big one is control. China manages its exchange rate, so the yuan's value is kept relatively stable.
Which sounds good on paper.
Right, but Western markets are used to currencies that are free-floating, so this managed approach makes them nervous.
It's like they're not playing by the same rules. So even if China tackles these hurdles, is there more to it than just pure economics?
That's a great question, and this is where the book makes a really important point. For a currency to truly dominate, you need soft power.
Soft power.
It's that intangible influence, cultural appeal, technological innovation, a strong education system. These factors can make a country's currency and its entire economic system much more attractive.
So China can't just be the world's factory. It needs to up its game in other areas too.
Exactly. And that's not a quick fix. It takes time to build that kind of reputation and influence.
Makes you wonder, what does all this mean for the average person? Should we be ditching our dollars for yuan anytime soon?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the almighty dollar leaves us with a really thought-provoking idea. Maybe the future isn't about one currency winning over the other. Maybe it's about finding ways for these economic giants to coexist, even cooperate in a more balanced way.
A financial world with multiple power centers. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll be talking about digital currencies instead.
Now that's a deep dive for another day.
It sure is. But in the meantime, everyone listening, take a closer look at that dollar bill in your wallet. It's got quite a story to tell.